Hello, my name is Kira. 5 years ago, at a family party, my sister humiliated me in front of everyone, slapping me across the face and calling me trash. And the worst part? My mother stayed silent. But here's the thing, I never let that moment define me. Now, 5 years later, I run the company she begged for a job at. But what if I told you, it wasn't just about the slap or the humiliation. It was about the years of being overlooked, erased, and pushed to the edge. Would you believe that what was meant to break me ended up making me stronger? The truth about family can be dark, and sometimes it takes years to finally get your revenge. But the real question is, what happens when you stop asking for permission to be seen? The air in Savannah always carried a mix of jasmine and judgment. At least it did whenever the family gathered. I remember that day as vividly as if it were seared into my skin. Mother's 58th birthday. Backyard. Catered. Dozens of white folding chairs lined up in rows like they were prepared for a wedding instead of a family party. The garden twinkled with fairy lights strung between crepe myrtle trees, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Everyone dressed like they were auditioning for a Southern lifestyle magazine spread. I arrived late, I always did. Not because I wanted to, but because showing up early gave them more time to remind me I didn't belong. I wore a navy dress I'd borrowed from Cora, my dad's sister. It fit a little loose at the shoulders, a little tight at the waist. I wasn't comfortable, but it was clean, and that was the best I could offer. "Look who finally made it," a voice called from the porch. Seraphine, my sister, older by 6 years, sharper by reputation. Everything about her screamed perfection, her posture, her dress, her champagne glass dangling from 2 fingers like it was an accessory. She didn't hug me, didn't even walk over. Just smiled that half smile that never reached her eyes. "You still using Mom's old Honda?" she asked, not even pretending to whisper. The group near her laughed, soft and polite, not because the joke was funny, but because it was expected. I nodded. "It gets me where I need to be." "That's what they say about cockroaches, too," she added, sipping her drink. I didn't reply. I didn't have to. That's how it always was. She threw the punches, and I took them with a smile and an internal prayer that someday someone would notice. The food hadn't even been served yet. I tried to find a quiet corner near the lemon tree where the servers weren't hovering, where I could pretend to check my phone. But even there, their voices reached me. "You know, Seraphine could have gone to New York," someone said. "She stayed for the family," someone else replied. That was the myth they built around her. The dutiful daughter, the gifted CEO, the one who carried the family name like a crown. And me? I was the asterisk, the cautionary tale. What they didn't know, what they refused to know, was that I was the one who helped Seraphine start that business. I was the one who pulled all-nighters designing her first pitch deck, writing her copy, testing her product interface when no one else believed in her. And when the cameras came, when the investors showed up, she acted like I was the intern who forgot to show up. I swallowed it for years, until she made it clear that day that swallowing wasn't enough. Later, when the cake had been cut and the drinks poured, Seraphine made her move. She walked up to the garden center like it was a stage. Everyone turned to look. She didn't toast our mother. She didn't thank the guests. She looked at me. "Kira," she began, her voice too loud, too sweet. "You remember that time you tried to write code?" A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. "You downloaded a virus instead, took down my laptop." "Said you were building an empire," she said, eyes gleaming with mock affection. "That was 5 years ago," I replied, steady. "Some dreams should stay dead, sis." The air shifted. The music paused. Someone coughed. No one moved to stop her. "You know what your problem is?" she asked, stepping closer, heels sharp against the stone path. I didn't answer. Didn't blink. "You walk around like the world owes you something just because you showed up. But you never do the work. You're a leech. Always have been." I opened my mouth, but before I could speak, she slapped me, hard. The sound cracked like a gunshot across the garden. I staggered back. My hand flew to my cheek. The sting bloomed fast, hot, humiliating. The silence that followed was louder than the slap. No one said a word. Not Aunt May, who I once drove to her biopsy. Not Uncle James, who I helped cover rent when his job fell through. Not even Cora, who stood frozen near the dessert table. And my mother. She looked down at her plate. "Mom?" I whispered. She didn't raise her head. "You always make things dramatic," she said, barely audible. That was it. Not stop, not apologize, just a sentence so quiet and sharp it cut deeper than Seraphine's hand. I stood there for another beat, long enough to feel my shame solidify into something colder, heavier. Then I turned. No one stopped me. No one followed. The garden lights blurred as I walked, not because I cried, but because my eyes refused to stay dry. My heels caught the gravel, then the sidewalk. I didn't even wait for a ride. I walked 2 miles to the nearest bus stop. It was past 9 when I got there. My dress was wrinkled. My hair smelled like citronella. I sat alone on a rusted bench, wiping the makeup off my cheek with a cocktail napkin. A car passed. A couple laughed. The world kept going. I didn't even pack a bag. Just left, carrying only that one sentence. Trash like you. The bus left Savannah just past midnight. I didn't know where it was going, and I didn't care. When the driver asked, "Where to?" I stared blankly at the schedule board and picked the one with the fewest stops. Houston. I had never been there. I didn't know anyone who lived there. That was the whole point. My dress still smelled faintly of gardenia and barbecue smoke. My cheek throbbed where Seraphine's hand had landed. My phone buzzed once with a text from a number I didn't recognize, some distant cousin probably asking if I was okay. I didn't open it. I powered the phone off and dropped it in the bottom of my bag. There were 5 other passengers on that bus. 2 elderly women headed to visit grandkids, a guy in a hoodie who never looked up from his headphones, and a tired-looking mother with a sleeping toddler across her lap. No one made eye contact, which suited me fine. I wrapped my arms around my torso and curled into the seat, pressing my forehead against the cold window. I didn't cry. I'd done enough of that already. By the time we crossed into Louisiana, the early sun had turned the sky a soft orange. I hadn't slept. My body ached in ways I couldn't name. At a rest stop, I bought a gas station coffee and a pack of peanut butter crackers. The cashier didn't smile. I didn't either. We pulled into Houston early the next afternoon. I stepped off the bus with a backpack, $200 in my wallet, and no plan. The city smelled like concrete and humidity. I walked until I found a cheap motel near a gas station. The guy at the front desk asked how long I was staying. I told him a week, lying to us both. The room was small, stained carpet, flickering light, a bed with a quilt that felt like sandpaper, but the door locked, the water ran, and I had privacy. That was more than I'd had in years. I started taking whatever jobs I could find on the street boards, restaurant cleanup, unloading boxes at a furniture warehouse, passing out flyers in parking lots. I didn't tell anyone my last name. I barely told them my first. People didn't ask. That was the beauty of being invisible. At night, I'd sit at the room's tiny desk and write in a notebook I labeled in thick black marker. Don't need them. The first page was a list. Names of everyone who stood silent when I needed them. I didn't write reasons, just names. One by one, I drew a line through them. On the 5th night, I walked to the library downtown. It was cool and quiet, a safe place filled with strangers who didn't care what I'd done or who I wasn't. I sat at one of the public computers and opened my email. The inbox was empty except for junk and an auto payment confirmation for my old student loan. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote to my mother. I didn't ask for money. I didn't accuse. I just asked one question. What did I do that made it okay for you to stay silent? I kept it short. 4 sentences. I stared at the send button for a long time before clicking it. 3 hours later, her reply came. Hope you learn to stop playing the victim. That was it. No greeting, no punctuation, not even her name at the end. I remember staring at that line on the screen until it blurred. Not because I cried, but because something in me broke free. The last thread. The final illusion that maybe, just maybe, if I just worked harder, loved harder, waited longer, she'd see me, she saw me, and chose not to care. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix it. 2 days later, Cora called. I hadn't saved her number, but I recognized her voice immediately. She sounded hesitant, like someone holding a fragile box. I heard what happened, she said quietly. I didn't know what she meant. There were too many options. Your mom, she never told Seraphine that the money came from you. I froze. What money? The 10,000, she said. When Seraphine's startup was failing, you wired it through my account. You asked me to keep it discreet. You remember? I remembered. I remembered working double shifts, skipping meals, selling the last pieces of furniture from my tiny apartment just to scrape that money together. I remembered trusting Cora to deliver it anonymously so Seraphine wouldn't feel ashamed. But I'd assumed my mother would tell her. She said it was better not to mention it, Cora continued. Said it would just complicate things. Complicate things. Like truth was a burden she couldn't be bothered to carry. She told the family I'd stepped in to help, Cora admitted. I didn't want credit, Kira. I thought she'd tell them. I swear. I wanted to scream, but there was no point. It wasn't Cora's betrayal that hurt. It was my mother's. Again. She hadn't just failed to defend me in public. She'd actively erased me in private. Thanks for telling me, I said, my voice even. Kira, I should have spoken up. It's done, I said, and hung up before she could say more. I went back to the motel, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slow and steady. Then I opened my notebook again, flipped to a new page. At the top, I wrote, New rules, no more begging for belonging, no more explanations, protect your peace at all costs. The next morning, I returned to the library, not for email, not for family. I typed in, how to learn to code for free. That's how it started. A Google search, a free video series, a beginner's guide to Python that I didn't understand a word of at first. But I didn't stop. I checked out books with cracked spines and torn covers. I copied code into the free Notepad software on the public desktop. I failed every small assignment, but I showed up. I kept coming back. I stopped trying to be seen. From now on, I'd build things no one could ignore. I didn't respond to the invitation. I didn't even consider it. The email from my cousin sat unopened in my inbox for 2 days, staring at me like the ghost of my old life. It felt like the universe was mocking me, offering me a seat at the family table that no longer existed. My name was listed as guest of Seraphine. The words punched me in the stomach. There it was, a line drawn in invisible ink, a sign of how far I'd fallen, how invisible I'd become. I wasn't even a real guest anymore, just an extension of Seraphine, the version of me she was willing to allow in the same room. I didn't need to read it any further. I deleted the email before my finger could shake. Not one reply, not one word to explain the hurt. There were no excuses left. Just this, an email with an invitation that wasn't meant for me. In the quiet of my tiny apartment in Houston, I felt a hollow ache spread through my chest. It wasn't just the slap anymore. It wasn't just the public humiliation. It was all of it. The erasure, the invisibility. All the love and care I'd put into Seraphine's business, everything I'd given, only to be erased in front of the people who should have supported me. It wasn't enough to be better than her. I'd spent years being better, and what did I have to show for it? A broken relationship with my family and an endless list of things that I'd given up for people who didn't care. I closed my eyes, trying to fight the cold anger creeping through me, but all I could feel was the weight of rejection. I had tried so hard. I had begged for their understanding, for some acknowledgement that I was here, that I mattered. But now, the only thing that remained was the echo of a family that never saw me. I remembered the late nights back in Savannah when Seraphine's startup was in its infancy. I was the one who stayed up, nights after nights, long past midnight, planning her branding and designing her logo. I wrote pitch decks that helped her secure investors. I researched her competitors, pieced together the strategy that eventually got her on national television. But when the cameras rolled, when the spotlight hit, Seraphine said, "I built this alone. I always had the vision." I watched it from a break room in a warehouse where I worked my shifts, one of many odd jobs I had to make ends meet, while Seraphine made her millions. She didn't mention me, didn't mention that I was the one who gave up my weekends and sleep to help her. I always had the vision. I wanted to scream at the TV. But there was no point in that. What was left to scream for? What had I given up for this betrayal? I stood up abruptly and grabbed my coat, walking out of the tiny room that had become my life. The anger hadn't even hit yet. It was too cold, too calculating, too deep. Now, I was in Houston, alone, in a city where no one knew me, where no one cared to remember my name. Not even Seraphine, not even my own mother, who had erased my contributions as if they didn't matter. The anger didn't come right away. First, there was silence. A deep, heavy silence that swallowed everything I had ever been. But then, something inside me snapped. I couldn't go on pretending anymore. I wasn't going to stay hidden. I wasn't going to keep pretending I was fine. I wouldn't let them make me invisible anymore. In the library that day, I logged onto a free computer and began looking up ways to learn coding. It wasn't much, just a few basics, HTML, Python. It was all I could afford. I downloaded a few tutorials, started working through them, and failed miserably at first. But something in me had changed. I wasn't running from my problems anymore. I was running towards something, toward proving to them all, Seraphine, my mother, the people who'd forgotten me, that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. That evening, as I sat in my rundown apartment, typing out the lines of code for the first time, I could feel a shift inside. It wasn't just about coding anymore. It was about becoming someone no one could ignore. I opened my red notebook that I kept hidden from view, the one titled Invisible Evidence, and started writing. I wrote every single moment of betrayal I could remember. All the times they dismissed me, erased me, overlooked me. I didn't want to forget. I wanted to remember it all. Not for revenge, but as a reminder of what I had been forced to endure. What they had thought they could take from me. And I realized something. I didn't need their acknowledgement. I never had. As weeks went by, I kept working at my coding lessons. Every day, I walked to the library to use their free Wi-Fi. Every day I showed up, trying and failing, but never stopping. I never asked for their approval. I never asked them to see me. Instead, I told myself, build like no one's watching. Build something that can't be erased. Eventually, I applied for an online scholarship for a tech boot camp. I didn't expect to hear back. But one day, an email arrived. I opened it slowly, my breath caught in my throat. I had been accepted. It wasn't much, but it was mine. It was the beginning of something real, something that didn't rely on family to validate me. I smiled. It felt strange. It felt like the first real smile I'd had in a long time. They might have erased my name from the guest list. They might have stolen my contributions, my efforts, and everything I had ever sacrificed. But one day, I'd build something that would make them beg for a seat at my table. It had been a few weeks since I received that email from my cousin. At first, I thought it was just another small sting, a minor reminder that the family I had worked so hard to be a part of was slipping further away from me. But when the details began to settle in, I realized how deep the cut truly was. They were rewriting the family trust, and I wasn't even mentioned. The phone call came late in the afternoon. I had just finished another long day of coding, my hands stiff from hours at the computer, and was unwinding with a cup of coffee when my cousin's name flashed on the screen. I hadn't heard from him in months. "Kira," he said, his voice a little too careful, a little too soft. "I don't know how to say this, but they're rewriting the family trust. Your name's not on it. They're keeping it all in the family, you know?" My stomach dropped. The words hung in the air like a punch I couldn't dodge. "They removed me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated. "Don't shoot the messenger, Kira. But yeah, they did." I exhaled, suddenly feeling lightheaded. "They already did. I just didn't die." I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, letting the silence settle over me like a thick blanket. What was left to say? What was there to do? The betrayal wasn't just that they'd erased me from the family will, it was that they didn't even care enough to pretend I mattered anymore. A few years ago, my mother had told me something that now felt like a cruel joke. She said, "When I'm gone, at least you'll have a piece of me." It was supposed to be comforting, I guess. A reminder that despite everything, I still had her love, but now that peace had been stripped away, reduced to nothing more than a name on a paper, a footnote in a legal document, a reminder of what I was never going to have. I sat there in the dim light of my apartment, the words of my cousin echoing in my mind. I didn't even know how to process it. What did it even mean to be left out? What was left to care about when the very thing that tied me to them, my family, was being severed so completely? I walked to the bathroom, grabbed a lighter, and lit the old family trust that had been printed on paper. It wasn't much. It wasn't going to change anything, but it felt good to watch it burn, to see the evidence of everything I'd tried to build with them turn to ash. As the paper curled up and crumbled in the flame, I thought about all the moments I had worked so hard to protect them, all the times I had been there for Seraphine, for my mom, all the sacrifices I had made. And now, none of it mattered. None of it had ever mattered to them. When the ashes settled in the sink, I flushed them down the drain. That was it. That was my final act of releasing them. I was done being the afterthought. Done being erased. I wasn't going to cry about it anymore. I had to face the truth. It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about anything they could give me. It was about the fact that they didn't see me. I had been a part of their story for so long, and they had turned me into a ghost. But that was on them. I wasn't going to let their blindness define me anymore. I grabbed my red notebook, my invisible evidence, and flipped it open. I had a new project. This one wasn't about their rejection. This one was about creating something that couldn't be ignored. I started a vision board, placing it on the wall next to my desk. The center read, "Things no one can erase." I printed out my name, bold and bright in the middle, and taped it to the board. No one could erase me anymore. No one. I had to believe that. If I didn't, there would be nothing left. The next day, I sat down at my desk again. There was no more waiting for their approval. No more hoping they'd finally see me. Yes, I opened my laptop and started to email the lawyer handling the estate. "Please remove my contact from all future family matters. I waive any rights, because I was never given any voice," I typed, each word coming out sharper than the last. I didn't bother checking the tone. There was no need to soften it. I was done asking for permission. I didn't need their validation. I didn't need their permission. I hit send. The email was short, clean, and final. There would be no more ties, no more pulling me back into their world of invisible existence. I was taking back control. For the first time in years, I felt the weight in my chest begin to lift. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. I was building something that couldn't be undone. The next morning, I changed my phone number. I knew I'd never hear from them again, but I wanted to make sure they couldn't reach me, even if they tried. I archived all the family threads, unfollowed everyone on social media, and shut down every avenue they could use to find me. I was getting ready to disappear. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I spent the next few weeks pouring every ounce of energy into building my business. I finished the first prototype of the logistics app I had been working on for months. I applied for online scholarships, hoping one of them would finally give me a chance to prove to myself that I could do this. I couldn't keep looking back, couldn't keep hoping they'd see me. I had to build something bigger than them, bigger than any of the family drama, the betrayal, the silence. And when it was done, when I finally had something that could stand on its own, I would be the one in control. The next time they reached for me, I wouldn't be within reach. The morning after, I sat at my desk, scrolling through emails, when a subject line caught my eye. Seraphine M. Job application. For a moment, I thought I must have misread it. I stared at the screen, blinking, waiting for my eyes to adjust. The name burned through the words. Seraphine M. She was applying for a job at my company. I leaned back in my chair, my heart racing. The email wasn't long, just a short note. Looking for a fresh start. The message, impersonal and brief, hit me like a sudden wave. But I didn't panic. There was no anger. Not yet. What hit me instead was something more calculated. A decision. A choice that would shift everything. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Not yet. I needed to think. A wave of disappointment washed over me as I realized the significance. This wasn't just any job application. It was Seraphine asking for help. After all these years, after everything she had done, she was turning to me, but not directly. She was playing the same game, still, and that's when the clarity hit. I didn't need to act out of anger. I didn't need to respond immediately. I could wait. I could make her feel the weight of what she had done. A few hours later, I got up from my desk and walked down to the lobby. I could feel my heartbeat slowly in my chest, steady but firm. I wasn't going to rush this. When Seraphine arrived at my office, she had no idea who she was walking into. She was pristine, polished, the same Seraphine I had always known. The assistant greeted her at the door, guiding her to a chair in the waiting area. She was looking for a way back in. But what she didn't know was that the doors had been shut long ago, and I was the one holding the keys now. I stood at the threshold of my office, watching her sit there, waiting patiently. Part of me was ready to get up and face her, to finally say everything I had held in for years. But I didn't. I stayed in the doorway, watching her squirm. I had the control now, and it was a power I wasn't going to relinquish. And then the moment came. I made my way down the hallway, crossing the lobby as if I had all the time in the world. When I entered the waiting area, Seraphine turned and her face dropped. She wasn't prepared to see me. Her eyes widened as she stood up, a hesitant smile creeping across her face. "Kira?" Her voice trembled slightly, unsure if this was a joke or not. I gave her the smallest of smiles, the kind that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Thank you for applying," I said, my voice even, controlled. "Unfortunately, we don't accept family." I watched as the words sank in, her face flushing with confusion. Her hands started to fidget, and I saw the panic setting in. "Kira, it's not what it looks like. I've changed. I've learned from everything." But I stopped her with a simple gesture, a hand lifted slightly, silencing her. "This isn't revenge," I said, my voice calm and unwavering. "It's clarity." I turned my back on her, not giving her a second chance to respond. The power was mine now. I didn't need her apology. I didn't need anything from her. I walked back into my office, closing the door behind me. It wasn't the kind of victory that felt sweet. It was quiet. It was clean. And it was final. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The rest of the day passed in a blur, the normal office hustle resuming as though nothing had happened. But I could feel it. The tension was different now. My assistant seemed to be walking on eggshells. My team just a little more cautious around me. They could sense something had changed, but none of them asked, none of them dared. I could have deleted the security footage. I could have kept the evidence of Seraphine's humiliation, but I didn't need it, not anymore. I walked to my office whiteboard and jotted down a quote that had been on my mind all day. "Don't chase closure, become it." I stood there for a moment, looking at the words. It felt right. Everything I had been through, everything I had endured, had brought me here. And now, I was in control. Later, as the sun began to set and the city started to slow down, I sat in my office, reviewing a new proposal for the logistics app I had been building. The app was becoming my escape, my sanctuary from the family I had left behind. It wasn't just business anymore. It was me. It was mine. But clarity, as it turned out, had a price. I was ready for it, though. I wasn't afraid of the consequences. I had already made my peace with that. The silence between me and Seraphine, between me and the rest of my family, spoke volumes. I was no longer the girl they could manipulate, no longer the daughter who begged for a place at their table. I was building my own now. But clarity, as I was about to learn, rarely came without a price. The phone buzzed on my desk, and I glanced at the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "Are you going to leave us like this, Kira?" it read. I didn't even need to see the name. I knew exactly who it was. The day after I sent the email to the lawyer, I found myself sitting at my desk, staring blankly at the screen. The weight of the decision hadn't fully hit me yet, but I knew it was coming. I had set everything in motion, made my peace with the past. But as I scanned through my social media feed, something caught my eye. An ad, a post from a tech conference. Seraphine. Her smiling face beamed from the screen, and her name flashed under the title. Innovative logistics algorithm, a new vision. My stomach dropped. I clicked the link. There it was. Word for word, line by line. The idea I'd developed. The designs I'd created. The pitches I had written. All of it, now wrapped in a shiny new package and presented as her own. I stared at the screen, disbelief mixing with rage. She had taken everything I'd worked on, everything I'd poured myself into. I clenched my fists, my breath shallow. It wasn't just an idea stolen. It was my identity, erased. She was trying to rewrite our history, and I was nowhere in the picture. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. I clicked open another window, and there, buried in my old files, was the pitch deck I'd made. The mock-ups, the branding, the very concept of the logistics app, all mine. And now Seraphine was standing in front of a crowd, claiming it as hers. My pulse pounded in my ears as I dove deeper, scrolling through the white paper she had published. The graphics, the phrases, the language, every single part of it was lifted directly from what I'd written. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. She hadn't just stolen my idea. She was repeating history, making sure that I would never be seen, never be acknowledged. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I drafted my thoughts. But this time, I didn't hit send. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to cry. I knew what I had to do. I called my legal team that afternoon. The conversation was brief, efficient. They were ready to fight back. I had evidence. I had my records, my emails, the timestamps. This wasn't a small theft. This was industrial sabotage, and I was going to make sure she paid for it. But then, as I sat there, the weight of everything else I had been through slowly settled into my chest. This wasn't just about stealing my idea. It was about everything I'd been pushed into the shadows for, about being erased from the family story. It was about control. It was about power. I remembered the last time I had done nothing. The years of silence, the years of pretending I wasn't hurt. I'd let that happen once before. I wouldn't make that mistake again. I pushed back my chair, feeling the cool air of the office hit my face as I stood. The decision had been made. There was no going back. I had to act. I sat down, my fingers moving steadily across the keys, drafting the cease and desist letter. It was formal, it was concise, and it was final. But I wasn't done. I paused for a moment, then opened Twitter. I hesitated for a second before typing the words that felt like the only truth left. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them climb a ladder you built, then removing the last rung. I posted it without hesitation. By the time I returned to my desk, my assistant had already sent me a follow-up email. "Wasn't she here last week?" the assistant asked, a hint of concern in her voice. I didn't look up. My hands were still resting on the keyboard, but I was already thinking beyond this moment. "Now she knows what she missed," I said, voice calm, collected, and unwavering. I closed the screen, letting the words sit in the air for a moment. The past was catching up to me, and this was only the beginning. The office around me hummed with its usual activity. My team carried on with their tasks, but I could feel it, the tension. Everyone sensed something had changed. They just didn't know what. The phone buzzed again. It was another email. I sighed as I opened it, reading the name at the top. Seraphine. The subject line was simple. Job application. I clicked it open, and my heart sank. She was trying again, but this time, there was no pleading. There was no desperation. Just a short, cold message. I'm ready for a fresh start. It wasn't that I didn't feel sorry for her. It wasn't even that I hated her, but I was done being the one who reached out, done being the one who asked for validation from a family that had never truly seen me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to type a response. But I didn't. I closed the email, staring at the screen for a long time. Instead of responding, I deleted her message, every single trace of her. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't frustrated. I was something else now. I was in control. I looked up at the clock, the seconds ticking away. In that moment, I realized something that had never been more clear to me. They had erased me, but I would rebuild myself. I would make them see me. I would make them need me. The silence in my office felt heavier than it ever had before. The moment I saw the email pop up on my screen, I knew it was coming. My legal team had just filed the cease and desist, a clear message to Seraphine to stop pretending she owned what was mine. And in response, she did what she always did best. She took to social media. I clicked open the post. It was vague, cryptic, but the words felt like a slap across my face. "Some people pretend to build things just to steal the spotlight later," she wrote. A few emojis followed. The usual suspects, the sad face, the broken heart, the pleading hands. Classic Seraphine, always playing the victim. The post was quickly gaining traction. I could already feel the storm brewing as her followers, some of them old family friends, began commenting with concern. "You okay? Looks like she's hurting," one texted me. It wasn't the first time I'd been subjected to gaslighting. It wasn't even the second. At this point, it was just a tiring, repeated cycle. I didn't answer. Not a word. I let the storm swirl around me, let them wonder, let them doubt me, let them take sides. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to fight back immediately. The fire in my chest wasn't as intense as it used to be. The anger wasn't as explosive. I felt controlled, more like I was watching a game unfold and wasn't a part of it anymore. The next day, I went for a long walk. The streets of Austin felt more alive than ever. The city hummed around me. People, traffic, the constant rhythm of life. It was a reminder that the world kept turning, whether I was in it or not. But as I walked, I could feel the weight of everything settling in. Seraphine wasn't just trying to ruin me. She was erasing me, making sure no one ever knew the truth of what happened. She had already tried to steal my ideas, now she was trying to steal my voice. Back at the office, I buried myself in my work. I wasn't going to play her game, not anymore, not when the stakes were this high. Then, the phone rang. It was from my legal team. They'd tracked something down, a leak, an unexpected turn of events. A former contractor from Seraphine's team had sent us a video. I watched it in my office, eyes glued to the screen. The footage was grainy at first, but it became clearer as the video progressed. It showed Seraphine backstage at a tech conference, rehearsing lines. She was crying, wiping her eyes, practicing how to speak to the cameras, talking about how hard things had been for her. But that wasn't the worst part. She was playing the victim, and this wasn't real. It wasn't genuine. It was all an act. She was practicing how to manipulate her audience, how to tell a story that wasn't hers. I sat there, stunned, as the video played, over and over again in my mind. This wasn't a minor infraction. This was deliberate, calculated sabotage, and I wasn't going to let it go unnoticed. The video went viral the next day. As soon as it hit the internet, people started questioning everything about Seraphine's story. #performance. Sister trended on Twitter, and suddenly the narrative she had carefully crafted for so long began to crumble. Exposés started popping up. Anonymous blogs, articles digging deeper into her past, into the things she had done, all while trying to portray herself as the wronged party. Investors started pulling back, questioning her ethics, her ability to lead. It didn't take long for them to realize the truth, that I had been the one behind so much of her so-called vision, that she had used my work to propel herself forward while leaving me in the dust. I felt the satisfaction of knowing the truth was being exposed. But at the same time, I kept my distance. I knew Seraphine would lash out. She had done it before. This time, though, she wouldn't find me as easy to manipulate. Later that afternoon, my assistant came in quietly. "Wasn't she here last week?" she asked, her voice tinged with curiosity. I looked up, smiling just slightly. "Now she knows what she missed," I replied, keeping my tone cool and measured. The truth was, the interview had been the beginning of the end for Seraphine. She didn't know it yet, but she was already fighting a losing battle, and I wasn't about to let her get away with it again. My team continued to work, not asking questions, but they could feel the shift. Something was different. There was no longer any uncertainty in the air. This was my time to act, and I was taking control. Later that night, I took a long look at the security footage, the footage that had been quietly archived by my assistant. I didn't need it. I didn't need to prove anything. The world had already seen enough. I posted one last thing on my social media, a simple line: truth defends itself when you're no longer willing to. And then I attached a photo, a picture of the original whiteboard sketches I'd made for the logistics app. The timestamp on the photo was from years ago, before anyone else had even heard of it. I let the post sit there for a few moments before I logged out. The decision was made. The world would know the truth. And if Seraphine didn't like it, well, she'd just have to deal with it. As I walked away from my desk, I knew the game had shifted, and I was in control now. The courtroom was cold, but the air was thick with tension. I had already been here before. The legal back and forth, the high stakes, the game of power. But this time, I wasn't the one being crushed. This time, I was the one standing tall. Seraphine had tried to make one last desperate move. She sent a letter to my board, claiming that I was sabotaging her success, that I was holding back the family, and making decisions for personal revenge. It was classic Seraphine, trying to twist the narrative, make herself the victim, the one who was wronged. But I wasn't having it anymore. My response was simple. I walked into the board meeting with a final dossier in my hand, a neat, organized file of everything that mattered. The email exchanges, the timestamps, the versions of code, everything. There was no more back and forth, no more apologies or explanations. I delivered the facts, clean and precise. Here, I said, placing the file on the table. Take a look for yourselves. You don't need my words anymore, just the truth. I stood there, waiting for them to flip through the pages. The room was eerily silent. Finally, someone spoke. A member of the board I hadn't seen much of over the past few years. This is clear. This is undeniable, he muttered under his breath, almost to himself. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything was laid out in black and white. The legal team would handle the rest. All I needed to do now was watch Seraphine unravel in front of the world, and that's exactly what happened. The court ruled in my favor. The copyright infringement suit was granted, and Seraphine's company was stripped of its intellectual property rights. Investors pulled out. Fast. They had backed a lie, and now the truth was finally shining through. I had always known that she had used my ideas, my work, to propel herself into success. But seeing it all fall apart, seeing her lose everything, there was a certain satisfaction in it. It wasn't just that I won. It was that the truth was out there for everyone to see. 2 days later, I got a call from my lawyer. It's over, they said. She's been dropped from her own company. I couldn't help but feel a cold wave of satisfaction wash over me. Seraphine had spent years building a life based on lies and stolen ideas. Now, it was all crashing down. Her LinkedIn went silent. Her personal blog? Locked. She wasn't even responding to her closest allies anymore. The public sympathy she once had quickly evaporated. I walked downtown to clear my head, feeling the weight of it all finally lifting. As I passed by a billboard for my company, I looked up and stared at the image of myself, the one they had put up to promote the launch of our new app. The advertisement was a stark reminder of how far I'd come and how far Seraphine had fallen. I didn't smile. I just felt lighter. I didn't need the applause anymore. The victory was in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that I had taken control, that I had stopped letting her destroy me. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and called Cora. It had been a while since we'd spoken. It's done, I said, my voice almost whispering. It's really done. There was a pause on the other end of the line before Cora's voice came through softly. You didn't destroy her. You just stopped letting her destroy you. Her words sank in. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making her suffer. It was about me. It was about taking my power back. And for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe again. When I hung up, I sat there on the steps outside my office building, letting the weight of the last few months settle into my bones. The battle wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about the fight itself, the strength it took to keep going, even when everything seemed stacked against me. Later that evening, as the sky turned dark and the city lights flickered to life, I received a voicemail. It was from Isolde. I had avoided calling her back after everything that happened, but hearing her voice, even just for a moment, was enough to make me pause. "I don't know how things got here," she said, her voice trembling. "But if you're happy, I'm glad." I didn't call her back, but I saved the message. I didn't know why, but it felt important. Maybe it was a part of me that still wanted to believe, still wanted to think that someday, somehow, we could fix what was broken. But for now, I wasn't ready to make that call. I was finally at peace. Not because everything was perfect, but because I had learned to stop chasing answers. Sometimes, peace comes not from having all the answers, but from surviving the questions. It was a quiet evening when I walked past the guest room, now converted into a reading room. The room, once filled with chaos and the sounds of childhood squabbles, had transformed. The bed had been replaced by a reading nook, a soft armchair sitting beneath the window. A few books lined the shelves, and on the desk, a framed notebook sat sealed in glass. It was the notebook I'd carried for years, filled with scribbled ideas, dreams, and blueprints for things that never were. I dusted the frame, but didn't touch the notebook. There was a certain peace that came with seeing it here, untouched, preserved. The girl who once held this book had grown into someone else entirely, someone strong, someone who had learned to let go. But the past never truly leaves. It lingers in corners, in rooms like this, in the empty space where Seraphine used to be. I shook my head and turned away. The dinner I hosted that evening wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about creating something new, something grounded in choice and authenticity. I had learned the hard way that family wasn't always about blood. I watched as the people I had surrounded myself with filled my apartment, a group of friends and colleagues who had become my chosen family. Everyone brought something homemade, a casserole, a pie, a bottle of wine. No one was looking for approval. No one was trying to impress anyone. We just gathered, connected, and shared. One of them raised their glass. "To the family we choose," they toasted. The words hung in the air for a moment. I didn't need the spotlight, didn't need to stand and say anything. I just took my glass, raised it silently, and joined in. The warmth of that moment filled me in a way I hadn't expected. I looked out at the city skyline from my balcony, wine in hand. The lights blurred together in a beautiful sea of motion. I didn't need to make a grand statement. I didn't need to prove anything anymore. I had everything I needed right here. As the night wore on, the conversations grew louder, more relaxed. It was just the way I liked it. Easy, comfortable. No false pretenses. The warmth of the room, the laughter, the food. It was everything I had worked for. Not the recognition, not the vindication, but the freedom to be who I truly was, surrounded by the people who truly saw me. But that night, something unexpected happened. During a meeting the next week, we were discussing an upcoming project when one of the interns, a young woman named Emma, was belittled by a vendor. He'd made a comment about her work, something that had nothing to do with her skills, but everything to do with his ego. I could feel the tension rising in the room. Emma's face flushed red, her eyes glassy. She tried to hold it together, but I could see she was close to tears. I didn't hesitate. I stopped the meeting mid-sentence. "No," I said firmly, my voice cutting through the tension. "We don't allow disrespect in this building, especially to those still learning." The room fell silent. Emma's shoulders trembled, but I could see the relief wash over her. She wasn't alone anymore. "Are you okay?" I asked her after the meeting. She nodded, but the tears had already begun to fall. I handed her a note, something simple but significant. "You're seen. You're not alone." The words I once wished someone had said to me. The truth was, I didn't need revenge anymore. I didn't need to prove anything to Seraphine or anyone else. I had moved on. But seeing someone else feel the weight of what I had felt, seeing them rise above it, made everything feel right. Later that day, I sat down and wrote a letter to Seraphine. I knew I'd never send it. I had nothing left to say to her. But I needed to write it, to let the last of it go. It wasn't a letter filled with anger or bitterness. It wasn't about revenge. It was simply reflective. "I hope you find peace. But I've found mine without you." I folded the letter and set it aside. It was over. There was no need to revisit it. The truth had already been spoken. The rest of the week passed by in a blur of meetings, work, and quiet reflection. But something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I had fought for what was right, and now I was free. One evening, I took a walk along the river trail in Austin. The sun was just setting, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange. The sounds of the city were distant, and all I could hear was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. I thought about everything that had happened, the battles, the losses, the moments that had nearly broken me. But in the end, they hadn't broken me. They had shaped me into something stronger. I stopped at a bench, looking out at the river, and allowed myself a moment of peace. I could hear my voice in my head, like a quiet narration. "They thought they broke me," I whispered to myself. "They didn't. They built the walls I needed to grow in peace." I smiled faintly to myself and looked up. The last frame wasn't of me. It was of my name, lit up on a building downtown. My work, my creation, my legacy. I had made it. I had survived. And for the first time in years, I knew what it felt like to truly be free. As we wrap up Kira's journey, it's clear that true strength comes from within, not from the people who try to tear us down. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't about confrontation, but about building something they can't take away. It's a reminder that even in the face of betrayal, you have the power to rise above and take control of your own destiny. What would you do if you were in Kira's shoes? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories of resilience, revenge, and triumph.